Hello! Happy Thursday, happy Text Adventure Thursday, and welcome to part 2 of our book club on small gods. What do? We declare ourselves a book club! Why is chat full of cow puns? Dark of Nate can't utter another joke. Paladin356 just reset for 12 months. Happy Thursday, Amy. Thank you very much. Happy Thursday to you. Congrats on getting your mug. We just squirreled ourselves a book club. Hi, Union Jackal, Canuck Quiz Kid, Dark of Night, JJ loves the sound of, Leia Sky, Ninfatype, Sequence Diphthong, Cow Emoji. Ooh. Key Square Triamus Reedy. Star Pilot 6. Why not, says Dark of Night. Fifth Daughter just reset for 10 months, almost to a mug. Thank you so much. Your support on here makes it possible for me to keep doing this. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. Aleph Sharp just reset for 23 months. Welcome back to the Enthusiarmy, Aleph. Medium Night, because we like to keep things interesting for you in here, Amy. Oh, Critter Nation says because chat is full of cowards. Their words, not mine. Lanther Melodial just reset for 28 months. Greetings, Amy and Enthusiarmy. Thank you. Welcome back to the Enthusiarmy. Cow emoji, Amy. New book club greeting. Where's my cow? Lord Darkhan just reset for 20 months. Oof, that's a while. It is a while. Thank you very, very much. I see another one coming in. Oh! Dark of Nate has seen today's DC Daily. JJ Dane just reset for 29 months. Happy Thursday. Thank you, JJ Dane. Welcome back to the Enthusiarmy. Dark of Nate has seen today's DC Daily. Says, your Phil Jimenez interview was great. Now I need to reread Tempest, among other things. Phil Jimenez is a comic book writer and artist and an incredibly wonderful dude. I got to sit down with him, meet him for the first time, and talk to him about his love of Wonder Woman, his incredible work, his life in comics. Leia Sky just reset for 12 months. 1 year. Yay! I love this channel and everyone in it. Me too. Thank you, Leia Sky. Enjoy your mug. Jeff M just reset for 29 months. Oh my gosh, y'all. It's a flood today. Oh, it's a hype train is what it is. Oh my gosh. We learned about this on Space Day Sunday. For the next few minutes, anyone who subs or gifts or uses, I think, at least 100 bits will contribute to this total. And if it hits a certain cap, people get emotes. I think I'm getting the hang of it. Sorry, I don't 100% know how it works. But Aleph Sharp, look, sometimes we just need to milk the pun-believably word-inclined Enthusiarmy folks before book club. Tatzel is cheered. Pride bits for the hype train. Yay, pride bits. Oh my god, John Numa is both on pun theme and on book theme and says, the turtle moves. So talking to Phil Jimenez was an incredible treat, and that episode of DC Daily is up right now. If you are in the US, you can watch recent DC Dailies without a subscription. If you have a subscription, you can obviously watch them. As far as I know, there's not a non-US solution, and I'm sorry about that, but Corpse Sailor cheered. I missed it. Aw, fun and books. Not a Machine cheered. Hype for the hype inclined. Twitch, how does it work? Says Serotonia. I am going to try to keep making sure to read people's comments in here. Last guy cheered. Love this book club. I love it too. And if all goes well, this second part is going to be the second ever of my Twitch exports to make it to YouTube. So if you're watching this there, hello. You can join in these live most Thursdays, our book club day, on my channel. And if you want to watch it with the chat running next to it, there's a link in the description. But for you, now in the actual real-time world in this chat with me, hi, how's everybody's Thursday? Zather just gave a gift sub to Whiskey Jacket. And we hit level 2 of the hype train. Oh my gosh. Oh, well, we hit level 1, so now people are contributing to level 2. Aria Flame cheer. Don't see it on mobile app, but hype. I'm awake just at 6:30 a.m. Wow, 6:30 a.m. is early. I'm so glad you're here. I can't believe you're awake. Zather gifted us the Whiskey Jacket, and it shared rewards to 5 people in chat. Corpse Sellers continue the gift sub they got from an anonymous gifter. This is fantastic. Well, yay, we made our level 1, which means people will get emotes at the end of whatever time period. And there's 3.5 minutes to get in to see if we can make it to level 2 or to get those level 1 rewards, I think is how that works. Corpse Handler finished the book last Friday. But technically, we are only talking about the first half of the book. So, Part 2 of Small Gods, our Discworld entry in the book club. We are reading till page 200-ish. I know I never nailed down an exact stopping point, but we have read now the first half of Terry Pratchett's Small Gods. An early middle-ish entry in the Discworld series, but one that I love as a starting point for the whole thing. And stuff's getting real in this one. Last week, it's sort of amazing as I was coming to the end of this section to realize how nicely the themes were developing towards this halfway point. Tots with us cheered! I got my new side shape pattern and bonus lacy braids, and I'm hyped for total shenanigans today. Heck yeah, Tots with us. Thank you so much. I got an emote thanks to Starpilot 6's subscription. That's wonderful. Thank you. Starpilot 6 just reset for 17 months. VOD squad for today is Lemon Twist, Librarian Liz, and Teal and a Cookie. Hi, VOD squad. Medium Knight says, we decided amongst ourselves the phrase Vorbis sat upright. Okay, that's just past the 200 mark. So we will sort of squishily land there. But it is really interesting to divide this book, which has no actual chapters, into chunks, because it's made me realize just how well structured it is. Right towards the end of the first chunk, we had met Brother, we had met Ohm, and Ohm had the great revelation of just what it was that was making his connection with Brother so special and so unfortunately unique. And that, of course, is at the heart of this book's overall story. Ohm figuring out why he's stuck as a turtle and what's so special about Brother. And, of course, they were about to set out on their journey. So it's sort of astonishingly broken off well. Detective then cheered and said, a dog ate my audiobook, so I wasn't able to do the reading. Yeah, that sounds convincing. Nymphatai will be back for King's Quest to watching Eric's TVD RPG with me, Amy Dr. Best Doctor. Thank you. Enjoy. And this second chunk is the journey. The journey up to another very intense turning point, which if you landed, if you made it up to page 200, 201 in this edition, you can kind of already tell whether or not you made it to Vorbis sat upright, what's going on, and it is momentous indeed. The Union Jackal is also joining the VOD squad, needs to get up at 5 a.m. to watch Picard before work. Understandable. I've seen the first one, haven't seen the second one, obviously, it's not out yet. No spoilers for it here in chat, please, thank you. But what an exciting time. Medium Knight says, alright, thoughts. I love Ohm and Brother. They should have thrown Vorbis overboard when they had the chance. You don't just diss the sea like that, right? Obvious to the casual observer. Aleph Sharp cheered. I have both many thoughts on this book and also none. Oop, it's gone. Sorry. Hold on one moment. Based on my personal experiences, we had a long discussion on different religious ideas and diversity of thought. But basically, reading this for me is like, Aleph, please feel free to go ahead and continue that in chat. You don't need to do bits for everyone because I want to follow this thread. An extra account just gave a gift to J. Roby. Thank you so much. It shared more rewards in chat. And I got a reward from the hype train. I didn't even participate. That's exciting. All right, Corpse Chandler says, this is the point at which spoilers are inbound. Yes, there will be. And speaking of spoilers, Starpilot 6 says, if they pushed Vorbis overboard, it would have been for a noble purpose. Too soon. Alright, we have a few things going on right now. One is that a whole bunch of people are getting cute little Griffin train emotes from that hype train. Oh, how lovely. Alright, I'm going to hit thank. I'm just sending the emote. Now I'm putting my windows back. Dark of Nate says, it was so nice of Pratchett to design the structure of the book to suit the needs of our book club. That's my headcanon and I'm sticking to it. And Critter Nation had a question. Where is it? Question! Amy and other women in chat, what are your thoughts on Pratchett's lack of women in the book? We talked about this a little bit last week. Oh, and loves the sound of is saying, I brought this up last week, and the general feeling is that all the settings he's portraying are not women-friendly, but here's the thing, he does it in all the other books too. My basic response was that there is a reason I think that the Witches books are some of my very favorite in Discworld, but also for me, my experience reading this was that I was not as bothered by the omission of significant women as I might be for other books, because the thing that they're satirizing, or some of the inspirations for what they're satirizing, are large structures that exist in our world, which have historically not always been women-friendly. Now, there's way more to it. There's a lot of complexity. There have been times and places, even within the very structure that seems to be the strongest influence on their satire, where that there have been very significant women throughout its history. But it is a thing. It's an interesting thing. It hasn't kept me from enjoying the books, but I could get if someone else had trouble connecting to it for that reason. Because people are different. Mikey Glinsky overshot the reading a bit and finished the entire book. Sorry. This was a really tough point to stop. Because it's very intense right here at the midpoint. Again, probably not an accident. It's like he's good at writing books, Terry Pratchett. Doug of Nate says, chat has been derailed by a griffin. That's very us. Detective Zen says, the book came out in the 90s. Can it still be too soon? It's always too soon for that porpoise. Gnome Arbel's just reset for 29 months. Oh, that's better. Apparently headphones sound better when plugged into the computer. You know, I've learned that several times myself. Arya Flame always wondered what Vorbis meant when he asked Brother about his fathers. Polygamy in an interesting way, or ancestors? I assumed that it was a reference to ancestors, while accidentally betraying that Vorbis, certainly, as he does elsewhere in this text, believes in a hierarchy of genders, which is just part of the many things that make him a poophead. Meaning of Night says, I think the inclusion of the solitary grandmother also intensifies her importance, and I think that's pretty rad. And it certainly seems very intentional in the narrative. This book has already included 2 or 3 very pointed references to gender inequality in a disparaging light. Even though the book is not being particularly kind to the Omnian superstructure, they still make a point of how weird and unfair it is that his grandmother, who should have been running that place, was not allowed to. And they do it again when they talk about Ephebian democracy and the people who aren't allowed to participate in it. And the mere fact... Okay, I love the footnote on Ephebian democracy. So this section introduces a new area of the world. A city which appears to be sort of a very Discworldy, broad strokes parody of ancient Greece, especially in the like pop cultural form that we are familiar with of sort of Athens. So the very idea of like naked philosophers running through the street comes from sort of inherited stories of, is it Archimedes who's supposed to have the bathtub moment of Eureka? The stories that we tell ourselves about ancient Greece in combination with actual facts about ancient Greece in a soup that informs the parody world of Discworld. We arrive at Ephebe, and part of it is that, I don't know how to say Ephebe or Ephiba or Ephebian, which is throughout this book. Anyone who's listening to the audiobook who can tell me how they do this, please let me know. But I'm going to keep saying Ephebe until someone corrects me. Mikey Glency says, I'll do my best. The current reading stops in a heck of a place. It does. So here's my love for the footnote on Ephebian democracy. In the text, they just say, this place is a democracy. Because from the perspective of Omnianism and Brother's background, that's actually kind of a pretty cool, interesting departure step. And that replicates accurately the way that when we talk about the ancient world, it is often taught that it's notable that places like Athens were inventing forms of what we would now know as democracy. But the truth is that first you learn that fact, that's notable, or at least if you have an upbringing, an educational upbringing like mine, which is not everyone, that tends to get centered and be the first thing you encounter. And then, later on, you're sort of like, huge asterisks! Flag on the play! There were a lot of limitations to their idea of democracy. So... if I can find the specific list, it's what I love about the structure of putting it in a comedy footnote here. The Phoebians believe that every man should have the vote, asterisk, provided that he wasn't poor, foreign, nor disqualified by reason of being mad, frivolous, or a woman. And then, of course, being mad is a separate sort of linguistic choice. But in this case, it's meant to be a list of the many, by including the word frivolous, it adds a comedy bow on the sort of, the many ways you can get disqualified from that citizenship, which of course is reflected in the real world in a lot of ways, both in the ancient world and to today, where, like, voting rights and actual effective voting rights are unfortunately two very distant goals. If that didn't make sense to anyone, let me know and I'll dig into it. But I'm going to catch up on chat now. And while I do that, Aleph has continued the, thank you, sorry, We Meaning Book Club channel of the Enthusi Army Discord is where this discussion on different beliefs. For Aleph, reading this is like watching a really good parody of a popular movie I've never watched. I understand a lot of what it's referencing, and a few of the jokes apply to my experiences, and also a couple things that are just funny, but for the most part, felt vaguely understandable, but would have been much funnier to me if I had personal experience. That makes sense. I imagine, depending on which sort of background facts are familiar to you growing up, like for me, I didn't grow up with Catholicism as an institution, but I grew up around a lot of Methodist and then Episcopal churches. So that background is sort of close enough to make a lot of this make sense. I think a really good parody of a popular movie you never watched is probably a good description for why some works like this are going to hit more and less for different people. Loves the Sound of says that's the Pratchett experience, honestly. He's so parody heavy that you've got to know the originals to get all the jokes. Alright. Skipping down. Dark of an 8, yes, Archimedes, give me a big enough lever and I'll move the world. It's so funny that he's trying to request that lever from the pottery store. A Phoebe says Whiskey Jacket. Okay. That's what this is. I say it like the audiobook. All right, great. Yes, obsequious diphthong. Adult male landowning citizens. It's one big old asterisk on that historical democracy there. And yet still significant. It's interesting. John Numa, VOD Squad Editions. GGO to paste and not always weak. The more things change, eh? Says Corpse Handler. Right. Mikey Glinsky says, the use of the title Tyrant for the enlightened leader was fun. I did a bit of TV tropesing after I finished the book, and the title of Tyrant, while also a funny wittyism, apparently has some historical context. I believe I remember that, like, we get the word tyrant from some surprising early sources. Critter Nation says, also, it was brought up last week, but Vorbis is such a delightful villain to read. I love his parts of the book. How does Vorbis get scarier with every page? Okay, here's what I think is making him such a delightful villain, part 2. In the first part of this book, we meet Brother, and Brother is, like, we're watching Brother change a little bit, especially in this part 2. Brother is sort of awakening to ideas and perspectives that he has never considered and never had reason to consider. Brother is one of those characters who is instantly likable, and I feel like you could write a separate book on how they just get us on his side so immediately and for me, irrevocably. But what is interesting is that the particular form of danger that Vorbis embodies is made so much more effective because when we meet him, Vorbis is clearly an incredibly dangerous man. Can turn on anyone, devoted to cruelty. That tiny piece that one of his favorite facts about the world is knowing about people's capacity for casual cruelty. There's just levels. There's levels of how awful Vorbis is throughout this. But what's great is when we meet Brother and Vorbis, Brother is relatively safe from Vorbis. Because Brother, being pure and having faith and knowing the scripture and all this stuff, presents no kind of danger to Vorbis as he meets him. So the problem that the book is creating beautifully for us in this second part is that as Brother expands his mind, he is in danger of becoming the kind of person Vorbis attacks. And it's so effective as a device, because you root for brother to maybe, spoilers for this part 2, to maybe be becoming the prophet, to be asking questions, to be broadening his perspective and his horizons and questioning the things he was taught. But you do not root for him to get in trouble with Vorbis, the most dangerous, scary man in the world. So putting those things into direct conflict is so brilliant. I'm going to do my first Terry Pratchett, How You So Good. Now I'm going to skim back. Mikey Glinsky was born and raised Catholic and found a lot to laugh at. Apparently that may be a helpful background there. Zather's throwing in a plug for Pratchett's young adult Discworld books with Tiffany Aching as a nice alternate intro to Discworld with a female protagonist. Dark of Nate says, Tyrant was the title the Greeks used for a single leader with emergency power. It wasn't considered a bad thing at first. Like dictator for the Romans, one who speaks. So that the addition of meaning over time, like accreting onto the word, makes total sense. Tiramus prefers Ankh-Morpork democracy, where it's one man, one vote, and Lord Petinari is that man. Gamer Badger points out, right, if you read Weird Sisters, one of the witches ones, without knowing Macbeth, it probably makes a lot less sense. That's what I enjoy about Pratchett is, usually even if I don't know exactly what's going on, I can just surf along on the nice little jokes. But based on my reaction when they do ones on things I know, like the theater ones, it's 100 times as funny. So kind of good either way, but Aria Flame likes the way that Pratchett puts in a one-line joke and then over books develops it into a fully fleshed-out culture or character. Andy Ford, this section we meet the philosophers of Ephebe. And they are very, very funny as well. Andy Ford says, as a philosophy nerd, I really appreciate the reference to the is-ought problem. It made me smile. And I'm not as well versed in philosophy, but my impression of the is-ought problem, it would be sort of maybe the debate over whether philosophy should be handling how things are or how they should be, or whether that's a difference. If you can elaborate on that, Andy Ford, I'd love to hear just a quick summary version of that. Dark of Nate says there were, I think, 5 tyrants of Athens, the most famous being Pericles, who had a Shakespeare play written about him. But Pericles comes down in history for a lot of reasons, some of them good. Court of Sandler says, Pratchett is the reason I don't think I could ever write satire. It takes a person with some fortitude to hold up a mirror to society, go, this is you, and have them eagerly accept that and keep doing it. Well, that took a very serious turn. Because, one thing I have loved about revisiting this book is the reminder that the heart for me of every Terry Pratchett book I've ever read is his rejection of human cruelty and his disdain for systems that encourage it, or that want to make people less than they are. It is a profoundly, for me, humanistic and compassionate core belief, and I think it informs most of, a lot of his books are about different systems that grind people down and the problems with that, while they're also sort of fun and lighthearted romps a lot of the time. Those two things are always sort of operating for me. And, yeah, I had not thought about how depressing it must have been to do that for your entire life, and be very successful in saying to the world, maybe you could suck less, and then watching it continue to suck. Maybe it'd be more depressing if nobody bought your books about it not sucking, and they were like, you're wrong, we enjoy not, I don't know. I'm glad it succeeded, but. Sharkfacer says, how far in are we? I want to join in and read along. This is my favorite Discworld book. We're halfway through. Postdadast cheered. Thank you so much for those cheers, Postdadast. We did the first 100 pages last week, and we've done the second 100 pages, or are doing it right now. Meaning of Night says, Vorbis is so scary. Like, the first part of the book, I wasn't really scared of him. Like, okay, I see what you are and I don't like you. The second part, I'm like, okay, the cracks in the veneer make this even more scary. And John Numa apparently got into this a bit in Discord. This is a plug, by the way, for the wonderful community-run Enthusiarmy Discord, where I think y'all have been continuing some of these discussions. But Vorbis' discussion of truth. Woo! It was so great to have all of these philosopher fights as the lead-in for a discussion of truth, as Brother is encountering his first... what he knows to be... the first time he knows, or is encountering what he suspects may be a lie from a holy person that he has been taught to trust and believe in. And he is trying to figure out how to handle that information and how to incorporate it into his worldview. He gets from Vorbis a discussion on truth. Vorbis' discussion of truth, says John Numa, it was pretty darn on point as far as it connects with John Numa's, experience in fundamentalist Christianity. There's a focus there on, we know the truth, so our practices in defense of that truth justify anything that others would deem harmful. And Vorbis describes that quite well, in my opinion and experience, and personal practice at the time. That, again, that sounds very accurate. I did not grow up with that kind of tradition. And I can say that Vorbis' discussion of truth and bending it to fit what you need is something that I think we see over and over again in a lot of different settings, where another goal, such as power, is more important to someone than truth. They will bend the second thing in favor of the first one. And then often, if they bother to justify it, they will justify it via structures like that. Which I thought is part of what makes it so scary and so compelling, is that we can recognize that tendency, whether or not we've encountered it in a specific thing. Although if you have, I'm sure that's even more powerful. Sharkface says, sick, I won't spoil anything. The turtle moves! Which, I thought it was very significant. In this section of the book, I believe we have our first person who says to Brother, the turtle moves. And by the end of this section, making sure I'm not getting ahead of myself, yes, we have met the actual writer of the scroll that's causing so much trouble that we heard about in the conspiracy meetings from the first part of the book back in at the Citadel. Am I thinking Citadel? Yes, Citadel. We haven't even talked about the ocean voyage, by the way. And this poor captain who is just trying to survive his contact with the very unfriendly Vorbis and company. And the bargain with the sea goddess. And to me, just straight up one of the funniest parts of this entire thing is that in our world, a debate about whether God is real is a lively one. And part of the reason it is so lively is that generally, if you declare one way or the other, nobody strikes you with lightning. And it is somehow just so funny to me that in this fantasy world, people are committed to continuing that discussion no matter how many lightning bolts hit them. Nana's just giving us some obsequious diphthong. Thank you so much. Arya Flame says Arya Flame says agree Vorbis, and yet doesn't even enjoy the cruelty, which is even scarier. GJ Foe is now following. Thank you! Tatsulis says, I actually didn't like Brother until they got off the boat and started seeing things around the city. I actually went from kind of disliking him at first to being okay with him in the context that he was the least awful Omnian we met, to actively rooting for him and cheering him on towards the end. Oh, that's wonderful. Whiskey Jacket says, this book reminds me of how good Pratchett was at making supremely skilled and entirely offhand jokes. The fact that the Phoebian Goddess of Wisdom is called Patina just works on so many levels, and it gets me every time. Now, a patina of age is the sort of brownish thing that shows that something's like an old object, right? And it can be used metaphorically as well. Have I got it correct? I didn't look it up. I immediately just liked it as a name for sort of burnished old wise things and ancient artifacts, and Patina rhyming with Athena, and also Athena's my favorite goddess. So Patina, goddess of wisdom, and her penguin, which we don't 100% understand yet, but are starting to guess might have something to do with mediocre art skills. She was perhaps my favorite of the gods we haven't met yet. And speaking of which, Loves the Sound of is gonna remind us of some fun linguistic references. Let us in on some of the other language stuff going on here. Fun linguistic references Pratchett makes with his naming in this section. Ephebe, ancient Greek for a young man, as glorified by Golden Age Athenian culture. I did not know that, actually. It just sounded familiar for some reason. The philosopher Zeno's name literally means foreigner in ancient Greek. And the philosopher Legibus's name means laws in Latin. Now, Zeno argues with Ibid, which made me laugh a lot, because Ibid is what you use if you are citing sources and you don't want to write out the title of the book you're citing from a million times. So the second and third and fourth times you say Ibid to say same as the source I was citing earlier. So it might be that that was just a joke about citations and documents and philosophy, or it might be that it was intended as the contrast to Zeno, because outer and same as has not a direct opposite effect, but like a pretty close to one. Becky Glinsky says, I'm sensing a pattern with Pratchett writing. Joke, 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 reference, joke, stab of the knife. And I would say you have correctly intuited what it is going to be like to be reading Pratchett. Anonymous just giving us a Down Under Dwarf. Welcome to the Enthusiarmy, Down Under Dwarf. Shiny Marigold got worried for brother as soon as Vorbis noticed he had a photographic memory. Being Vorbis' tool is not better than being his target. He does seem like a man who will 100% turn on you eventually, no matter who you are or why. Anonymous just gave a gift to Alex J. Ellen and W. Thank you so much. And Anonymous gave a gift to Self-Aware Can Opener. What a great name. Can Opener, tell us what it is like to be a can opener. Star Pilot 6 says, I like the philosopher named Ibid. I remember when I was young reading stuff with footnotes and saw Ibid was referenced all the time, so they must have been really smart. Mobile Suit Jundam says, I could not agree more with how important Brother's growing threat to Vorbis is. Are we having a book fair? Is that what's happening? Because Sociology Geek just resubbed for 2 months, and I think I missed one in the middle. Just gonna scroll down. Oh, we are. We're having a wonderful anonymous book fair. Thank you so much. Your comments are so good that I'm skimming back to grab this. Mobile Suit Gundam says, I could not agree more with how important Brother's growing threat to Vorbis is. It's not just a satire of certain structures, but a comment also on how important the goodness of individual people is in making human structures good or bad. I absolutely think that's true. There is certainly already a recurring theme in this book that there is a very serious difference between a sense of right and wrong and a set of rules as to how to behave. That is definitely one of the targets of this book, is that one of those cannot be substituted for the other. And as we see right towards the end of part 2, we are entering the area of greatest conflict, because Brother is being asked to do what for him is impossible, which is make himself okay with doing things that he being essentially an accessory to evil acts and making evil acts possible because he's been asked by a holy man, which is sort of the worst thing you could do to someone like Brother, is ask him to lead Vorbis through a labyrinth and not care what happens to the people they meet along the way. Because we know so much about Brother and how he's been raised, and we also know that, you know, his faith is real. His God is real. That connection and that relationship is growing. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Zather says, fun fact, my first OG WoW character was named Didactylos after my favorite philosopher there. I thought it was very interesting that the great thinker who's coming up with the turtle moves thing is also a philosopher who is essentially a parody of, like, bumper sticker wisdom. This must have been where we were talking about what it must have been like to be Pratchett under these circumstances and watch things not get better. Gamer Badger says he was a very angry man and was angry at the world of man. J. Roby says Neil Gaiman described Pratchett as furious. And Arya Flame says, hopefully his readers suck less than average. All we can hope is that when people read these, their net level of suck goes down. I hope mine has. I hope mine continues to. Dark of Night says, this book keeps reminding me more and more of Gulliver's Travels. In the third voyage, Gulliver visits an academy of absurd academicians working on ridiculous projects, all of which were based on actual figures in the Royal Academy during Jonathan Swift's time period. Andy Ford is telling us about the is-ought problem. Basically, philosophy, human reason, can describe what is the case, but cannot describe why it ought to be the case. How does gravity work is a very different question than why does it work this way. Mercury83 is quoting one of the other best parts of this section, which was another footnote. Words are the litmus paper of the mind. If you find yourself in the power of someone who will use the word commence in cold blood, go somewhere else very quickly. But if they say enter, don't stop to pack. Aleph Sharp says what's funny and interesting, the one piece of Judaic philosophy that he has seen in this book came from one of the philosophers as a semi-joke, the bit about God's giving morality to people. Interesting. Medium Knight says, side note, I love how Brother keeps wandering in and out of the labyrinth and everyone's like, wait, what? It is a beautiful... It is amazing that someone like Brother sort of needs to exist in order to defeat this system. It makes me wonder what Vorbis' backup plan was here. But it is very, very beautiful because I, for some reason, never get tired of Brother not understanding how strange it is that other people can't do this. So he's just like, well, I left and then I came back. Corpse Handler says, I grew up immersed in that tradition due to geography, but I was looking at it from the outside and it looked like that to me too. This is, I think, earlier talking about the fundamentalism discussion. Critter Nation says, philosophy fights are one of the best parts, and Ohm comments on it. The philosophy bar fight. It's so funny. Let's see. Catching up again, just skimming a little bit here. Mikey Glinsky says, I did like how the superstitions of the sailors got wound up into the commentaries of God belief while not being a one-to-one statement of sailors are religious. It is interesting because meeting the sailor as our first sort of, the captain of the ship, as kind of our first very distinct outsider who's coming to this with, you know, beliefs that to us seem normal, like mirrors are not evil, and knowing that he has an outsider's view to which, to a certain extent, we have as readers of the Omnianism, and his caution and his missteps and his sort of the obvious impossibility of anybody not inside the system meeting with Vorbis's expectations really nicely underlines that, like, Vorbis's version of this institution is untenable and cruel. I'm gonna skin down a bit because there's a lot going on. I'm so sorry. Starbud6, if you late VOD Squad editions, Joseph for coffee, GGO to toothpaste, and not always weak. John Newman says, on doing the impossible, Vorbis asked Brother when they first met to forget. Brother considered that impossible, but did it anyway. So if Vorbis finds Brother doing other impossible things, like rejecting Vorbis' instructions, for example, perhaps Vorbis is to blame. Let's see. J. Roby has a recommendation for Philosopher Human. Action Philosophers from Fred Van Lente and Ryan Dunleavy was great. I've only seen a piece of that. I loved what I saw, but... Key Squared appreciated the space probe plaque-esque choice of basic geometry for interspecies communication. That was really beautiful. Loves the sound of, and I'm kind of going backwards here, sorry. Says, possibly my favorite part of this section stems from your comment about Brother's moments of realization. Ohm realizing how Brother's way of thinking is changing, realizing that he's becoming a prophet. I love the discussion of the shape of minds. Not just where the god says tortoises are cynics, and I'm starting to think like one because shape, your body is not just a vessel you pour a brain into, which I thought was actually sort of a beautiful statement of, like, the interconnectedness of our minds and bodies. But, I guess it could be misread as assuming that you, like, are what you look like, but I don't believe that's not what I took from it. But the shape of minds as a general, you know, a way of describing someone's whole personality. Like, Vorbis has a scary shaped mind, and Brother has a uniquely shaped mind, and, I love that. Aria Flame especially loved having played with computer turtles as a kid, loved the bit about Ohm drawing shapes. Alright, skipping. Fifth Daughter says, I learned so much of these book clubs, I love it. I do too, it's part of why I love it. Patina as in the rhyme and the metallurgic sense as whiskey jacket, and the less specific sense of a thin layer. People sometimes say that a person has a patina of intellect or something similar as an insult. Toyama says, I didn't like Brother at first either, but then I kind of started to get him in a Kierkegaardian way. Gratuitous name drop. I don't know Kierkegaard that well. Star Pilot 6 says a penguin is no weirder for a symbol of wisdom than an owl. Zather says, Copper Dome Roof is such a wonderful extension of a silly thought. It's things like that that get me so happy with Pratchett. Corpse Chandler says, being familiar with Enlightenment-era philosophers, the argument/fistfight was accurate to that time. Alright, I caught up to the sailor thing. Alright. Talsa, this is asking an interesting question. Do we have any thoughts, comments about Brother as a potentially neurodivergent lead character and how people treat him in the book? I'm curious what other people are getting from that. He's certainly... Part of the point of this book is that his brain does not work the same way as some other folks. He is a mix of different impulses, but also sort of strongly endorsed as, like, the way his brain works is awesome, and it's how his brain works. Let's see. Zather says, Vorbis' backup system if he hadn't found someone who could walk into the labyrinth. Zather says it probably involved a lot of expendables. That seems very likely. Just feeding the soldiers through the labyrinth one by one until you get through. Meaning of Night says the captain about the sailing discussion. Seems like the most regular guy we've met so far. And like, whoa, Omnians are wild and scary. Tatsulthus had to take a hard look at their dislike of Brother after realizing he was the way he was not because of willful ignorance about the cruelty around him, and rather because his brain just worked differently. It's an interesting combination of that and that the sort of the information he has and hasn't received, and the people who enforce that information for him. Like, he loved his grandma and was raised by his grandma and never felt a reason to begin to doubt things his grandma said, right? Even though we know that she enforced harsh physical discipline and a lot of other apparent, you know, very strict standards. What the book, I think, suggests is that what we should be watching here is how Brother reacts to new information. And he's having a very difficult time because, I mean, it doesn't get much more challenging new information than my all-powerful God is in the body of a tortoise telling me he's never met any of the prophets I memorized. That's a lot to take in. But slowly we're seeing it change him, and I find that very interesting. Loves the sound of says, oh, here's a name joke I just got. Didactylos, meaning two-fingered. Oh! I read it as didactic like a teacher, but you're right, dactyl is finger. Over here in sunny Britain, home of Sir P. Terry, raising 2 fingers in a certain way is an insult comparable to a middle finger. Interesting. How apt for a character like Didactylos, the philosopher who almost belligerently rejects every school of philosophy around him. Do you think that's... Does that sound accurate, like an accurate read? That's a really interesting interpretation. I guess he is sort of a giant middle finger to a lot of things. Certainly the Omnian is... Omnians? Think he is. Ah, Zather says, yeah, I love that. A big part of why I picked that for my old WoW character. Are you all doing wonderful song lyrics about philosophers? Is that from something that I should know because it sounds wonderful? Sharkfacer says he is, in my opinion, coded as on the autistic spectrum, and I love the care with which the story treats his difference. Conformity itself is a big bad in this book. It's brother's difference that makes him the hero. Fluffybud is wondering how nice the baths are. That's one of my favorite just... I love when Discworld is very goofy, in addition to when it is touching on very serious matters. And the fact that they're like, a famous story about early math involves getting an idea in the bathtub and running up and jumping up. And they have taken that to the extreme that this is an entire city of people just taking baths all the time to get ideas. Playing on the real world thing that we often get shower thoughts and great ideas in that kind of thing. So that there's, you know, just a thriving, expensive soap business in this city. It's beautiful. An anonymous gifter has given Dorthilius a sub. Thank you so much. Welcome to the Enthusi Army. Hello in Montreal, Dorthilius. Bonjour. I have tried to get the pronunciation of that right over time, and I don't think I'm close, but I'm glad you're here. A Monty Python philosopher song? Why don't I know that one? Loves the sound and says, another one? Omni meaning all, because here's an all-consuming religion about an all-knowing, all-powerful God, if there ever was one. And that I think there's so many levels of that joke, because Omnianism, part of their religion is wanting everyone to believe the same thing they do. That's why the captain is so afraid of Vorbis. And of course, the Om as a syllable has a long tradition in totally separate areas of religious practice. And I think means wisdom? Thanks, Corpse Handler. And Andy Ford loves the name Orange Crates, or Orange Crates. Zather says, well, there's plenty of reasons the captain is afraid of Vorbis. That is true. But the specific reasons, like that Vorbis is not a live and let live type, are an active problem. Meaning Night says, so what did we think of the end of this section? I have no idea what's going to happen next. Oh, yeah. The plot has gotten very intense. Brother has seen a new city, made a new maybe friend who's challenging and upending everything he believes, and has just been activated by his terrible boss Vorbis to do something that he is pretty sure is very, very wrong. And I think a lot of things are about to change in the world, but we don't technically know yet. For folks who have not read the rest of the book before, but are caught up to halfway, what are your guesses about what goes next? And those of us who've read it before, let's try to just listen for this bit. Kerrigan, I've read one Jasper before and I loved it, and I need to read the rest of them. It was a while back. Fluffybud says, I like how there are 20 different thunder gods, all the same person wearing different hats. It is interesting because they'd sort of... Oh, we didn't even get into the, like, the growth of godhood and Om's memories. We get a lot of protagonist Om, or in this section, which I thought was very interesting. His memories, trying to reconnect to his early days of godhood, and compare it to his current situation. Oh, and brother found out the truth towards the end of this section. The thing that Om learned at the beginning, at the end of section 1. Brother has now been introduced to that idea. And what will he do with that information? I don't know, because he's been kidnapped by Vorbis to do some bad deeds. Corpse Sailor, what I think of the end of this section, heavy breathing into paper bag. Mikey Glinsky says, what do I think of the end of this section? I quote, ah! Kiki Chappie, I'm sorry your connection wasn't working today. I hope we can see you next week for book club. Andy Ford thinks or points out that Vorbis has an army. John Numa glanced at the next 2 pages last night and has concerns. Apparently there is a possibly real, possibly debunked origin to what I think of as the peace sign being ruined in Britain, and that it has something to do with the English longbowmen who won a lot of wars for the English, taunting the French, who used to cut off their drawing fingers if they took them alive. That is a complicated legend. Woo! Medium Knight says, this is my first Discworld, so I think Vorbis is going to do a bit of a coup, and I want to see Brother with a God in a backpack stop a holy war. When you put it like that, it's just extra good, isn't it? Geek and Somebody's now hosting. Thank you! Obsequious Death, I'm actually not quite certain where we ended this part of the reading. Essentially, right at or just after they make it to the outer gates of Ephebe. And poor Brother is having a dark night of the soul right now, because he is... The writing in this section, as with his reference to standing on the edge of a pit, and looking over the edge, and looking into the pit, as these levels of, essentially, despair for poor Brother, who is technically doing the right thing, according to everything he's ever been taught. Oh, poor kid. Shiny Marigold says, my reaction, this is bad, we're running. Maggie May says, I'm worried no one's getting out of this alive. Popular theme in late 20th century UK storytelling. Leia Sky's reaction, oh dear. Zather says, I like that the fear the soldiers have for Vorbis compares to the fear of Brother that develops after he prays to Om and opens a path through the storm. Very different forms of fear, but one develops directly because of the actions of the other. Oh, and the bit of Om's memories that it ends on what is apparently one of those very Terry Pratchett-y, like, a tiny detail. It was a sheep herder, but it could have been a goat herd. Isn't it interesting how history goes? Just kidding, I'm making a huge statement. I thought that was a very, very interesting one. I have no idea whether it's accurate about sheep and goats, but I accept it for this version of fiction as a really fascinating beginning, like, origin story, essentially, for Om's form of godhood. John Newman says, the play of light and darkness throughout this section, and particularly at the end, is so good, even down to the guide's lantern light. Darkwolf says, I think about Didactylus and his empty lantern. And the discussion of light and dark with truth and other forms of truth. Minium Knight says, it's so quiet and so dark. It is interesting because this is... plot-wise, it feels like a fever pitch, and it's just putting one foot in front of another with all of this sort of technically action-y or intense stuff happening slightly out of Brother's view. But we know for a fact that Brother is incapable of failing to pick up something happening before him, in the same way that he, you know, he will not tend to leap to conclusions about a lot of things, But if you show him 3 nails, he can't see 2 nails. Mikey Glinsky says, I'll be honest, I went into this a bit set on not liking Pratchett, hype aversion and all that. I'm not 100% sold yet, but dang if this book wasn't a fun ride. I mean, there's nothing wrong with not enjoying something, but I do hope that you end up enjoying it. I get the feeling of occasionally if you've heard a million people go on about something, you're like, surely it can't be all that. But I love it. Whiskey Jacket says, oh, the sheep and goats thing is accurate. Just goats are just stubborn as anything. And Andy Ford says, yeah, sheep are stupid. Corpse Sailor says, having known both sheep and goats, hello farm country. That's very accurate. Medium Knight wants a mug check. What's on your white mug? This one is from the gift shop. From when I got to go to Britain for D&D in a Castle last year, and got to go to the Shakespeare's Globe gift shop, which has this beautiful little mug. I like this place and willingly could waste my time in it. It makes me very happy. Sharkfacer says, I think the Dactylus' empty lantern is a reference to the Greek philosopher who walked the streets shining a light in the face of strangers hoping to find an honest man. I think there was a joke about that in here, too. So yeah, that mug makes me very, very happy. Alright. Final thoughts on this section? Any favorite parts that we didn't get to? I thought the Goddess of Negotiable Affection was very funny, if a tiny bit, like, you know, some off-color jokes, but fundamentally, like, not a negative attitude towards her. Oh, the point where Brother is terrified by something on what is my page 130, and he says, oh, it wasn't Vorbis, it was only God. It's such a funny expression of the changing relationships there. Oh, and there's a piece of beautiful writing on 151, and also throughout this book. The city of Ephebe surrounded them. Dogs barked. Somewhere a cat yowled. There was that general susurration of small, comfortable sounds that shows that out there, a lot of people are living their lives. That's just beautiful. Partly because this is a new thing for Brother. Well, partly because just Terry Pratchett's view of the universe. It's sort of a sweet... It could feel lonely, but it feels somehow like being part of something when he says it that way. John Newman, we'll get into that one next time because it's basically right at the borderline. Goblin War says the comedy just wasn't for me. I found it a bit tedious. That's fair. There's something to be said for, you know, something makes you laugh or it doesn't. You can't reason yourself into finding something funny if it didn't work for you. But you also can't reason yourself out of finding something funny if it did. Aria Flame says, the darkness rushed in. Such a good line. I know! I felt bad leaving Brother in this moment. The Goddess of Lettuce made me laugh, says Fluffy Butt. Key Squared says, I love the small gods lost in the desert. Possibilities waiting to happen. Meaning of a night, banging on the desk. More book club! I need to read the rest of it. So we'll do about the next 300 pages. I will try to look for a cutoff point this time. I know I just left us with approximately 100. Let's see if we get lucky again, and it's a beautiful, neatly chunked off section of the book. Oh yes, and the mystery of Brother Murdoch is a particularly chilling unfolding in this section. Mikey Glinsky says, I initially found Pratchett's type of humor a bit grating. Then I realized it's real similar to the type of humor I try to have, and then learned something about myself and got quiet for a while. Maybe you're both very funny. Gamer Badger loves Brother's mind being opened and expanded. Obsequious Diphthong says, Pratchett, sweet, cynical, and angry, but in a righteous kind of way. Loves the sound of, is responding to Whiskey Jacket about something and says, isn't he easy to recognize? I mean, we can all name some Vorbises. Whiskey Jacket says, minor Vorbises, sure, Vorbi. I hope I never encounter a real one. Corpse Handler says, the small gods in the desert waiting for their chance, knowing, maybe, that they'll only ever get the one. Gamer Badger says, Vorbi sound dreadful! Dark of Night says, sweet, cynical, and angry? So Pratchett was a tortoise? Well, he did design a world on the back of a turtle. Maggie May says, I picked up the Kindle version and the numbering is really messed up with that. I am sorry that it is, you know, picking something without chapter borders does make this more complicated. I know folks are helping, especially Librarian Liz has been coordinating, helping different stopping points on the Discord. But yeah, we're aiming for 75% of the book. We're probably a little over 75 because I know the whole thing doesn't come in right at 400. It's a bit shy. Aria Flame is suggesting an end of next section just before Brother was standing in the desert on 298 on the Corgi edition. And I'm gonna say that probably... Let's see... Corgi is the earlier publication, so I don't know if I have that. It looks like that's 302 for me. But there's dots and dots. You know what? Bottom of 301, top of 302, right at Aria's suggestion. We'll go with it. Let's make that our official 298 in the Corgi edition, top, bottom of 301 slash, like, end of page 301 in mine. Loves the sound of an Aria Flame. We're both saying 288 makes it a good backup. Foxybot says, do what I do. Go through the whole book 3 times. That second suggestion is 292. Let me just cheat. It'll probably leave more evenly sized chunks if we stop a little shy. So let's do it. It looks like right before well takes us... Forget what I said earlier. We're going bottom of page 291 in mine, or top of page 292. That's going to be our cutoff point in this edition. 291, 292, right before the words well. That's going to be our part 3 stopping point for next week. Thank you both for the suggestions. If anyone wants to tell me it's impossible to forget, like, how can I ask you to forget what I just said? That's impossible. Yep. Brother would remember Chiyamas. All right. Mikey Glinsky loves having the perfect face every time you have to visualize Ohm. Your sister-in-law's tortoise. P.S. He's adorable. That's wonderful. All right. We will talk part 3 of Small Gods next week. Come at me with your favorite moments, big questions, impressions, etc. And then we will get ready for the end. And yes, Medium Night, if you find a corresponding stopping points for your edition, Reedy says it's 288 in the UK Corgi 93 edition. I love that there's a Corgi edition, and I wish I knew where mine was, because it was somewhere. But thank you so much for another wonderful book club. I love talking about these things with you, and I can't wait to do more of it. Now I'm going to take a short break and refill my tea while I get ready for some King's Quest. So, Gonna put the sign on. I haven't tried doing this mid-stream before. So let's see how it goes. Be back in 2 minutes.